Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Karab Mars here with me today. How you doing, Karab?
I'm well. It's actually Karab.
Karab. Okay. Hey, how you feeling out there?
I'm great, thank you. It's
That's
only
good.
2 o'clock here, so.
What time is it there?
It's only 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay. So it's early afternoon where you are.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in Eastern Standard Time, so it's 5 o'clock for me out here. Almost time for ice cream and a movie. Where you from?
Washington State.
Washington State. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about like Washington State? What's it like growing up there?
Wow. Okay. So I grew up in Eastern Washington, which is the other side of the mountains. And it's much, much more different than over here. I'm now about 20 minutes away from Seattle.
Okay. Where did you actually grow up?
So I grew up in a little town called Moses Lake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Moses Lake. Did you actually grow up on the lake?
No. I grew up in 18 different foster homes. So.
Okay. Were you born in foster care, or where were you before you went into foster care?
Oh, okay. So my life story in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I put myself into foster care when I was 8 years old. I walked into a police station and I said, enough, I'm done. Take me away. And I went into foster care. Well, first they took me back because, what kid does that? So they took me back to see my mother. And my mother, she hid all of the drugs that were in our apartment. She was a drug dealer, and she was just like, oh, my baby, I love you so much. And then as soon as they left, she took a pair of pliers and she held them next to my mouth. And she said, if you ever bring the pigs to my house again, I will rip your tongue out. So about 2 weeks later, I left and never went back. Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that in my life.
Yeah.
But this is why here on America's Next Motivator, we take it slow. We go through the different phases of your life so that we can understand the gravity of your message today.
Sure.
So when Karab is saying, hey, everybody, I'm trying to help youth in foster care, you're not saying it because it's a trendy thing to say. You're saying it because you checked yourself into foster care when you were just 8 years old.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Can you talk to me about some of the precipitating factors? I mean, you said your mother was a drug dealer, but I'm not going to do any guessing about what your life was like.
That's fine. So I don't know. Are you familiar with the ACEs scale?
No.
Okay, so the ACEs scale is an adverse childhood effects of trauma scale. The highest score that you can get is a 10. I'm a 9 on that scale, which means that every kind of sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, I went through. So for me, if I rewind, I remember my mother being a pretty good mom until I was about the age of 5. And then she got introduced just to marijuana. And that changed her from being on the track to become a preschool teacher. She was a single mom. She's Caucasian. It changed her trajectory. So she became this person who, like, from as early as I can remember, she used to make me call her slave girl and made me call her your majesty. So that's just where the mental abuse started. And then she would do things like, I don't know what I can't diagnose her. But she would do things just to humiliate me. So, and this is kind of TMI, but whatever. When I was a little kid, if you would have dirty underwear as a child, she would pin them to the outside of my clothes and make me wear that to school. And she'd pay a neighbor child to tell her that I indeed wore those to school. So I spent 2 years, 2 teachers, mind you, behind the classroom, behind the coat racks, hiding from the other kids so that they wouldn't make fun of what I was wearing. I still wore it because I didn't want to get beat when I got home, but I didn't want anyone to see. And my teachers just sort of wrote me off as, I don't know, maybe special needs. I don't know what they did, but they didn't do anything about the coat rack situation until one teacher, Mrs. Bennett, and she finally said, hey, there's an issue here. This child needs to see a counselor. So
that's right. And you're saying that as far as you can remember, things were a little bit kind of normal until your mother got involved with weed.
At first, yeah. And then she, right after weed, or after marijuana, she got involved with a man. And then when she met that man's son, she got involved with him. Before that, she had decided one weekend that she was going to commit suicide. So she sent me with a man that she thought would be a good father figure. And he wasn't interested in being my father. So at the age of 5, I lost my innocence. And then when my mom did get involved with, his name was Jack, and then his name was Donald. When she did get involved with the son, Donald, I told him, because I thought, I'm going to have a dad, so I'm going to tell him what happened to me. And his words, and I'll never forget them, were, don't tell your mom, we wouldn't want to upset her. And then from then, they started grooming me for prostitution. Luckily, before anything could happen that was too strong, my stepfather robbed a gas station and went to prison, and I ran away. So
was your biological father a part of the picture at all?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
So I have a brother who's 9 years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah. And so actually what happened, and the way that I finally got out, was that my mother she would beat me every day after school. I had to lay across the couch. She'd take a cable cord and she'd beat me 10 times. And if I moved or cried, she'd start over. So she used to make a game out of it. So my brother, who was just starting to talk, she would say, hey, was Kara bad today? And if he said yes, she'd say, all right, lay over the couch. And if he'd say no, she'd say no, say yes. And then she'd start again. And one time when she was beating me, the cable cord flew out of her hands. And that was the second time that I left. And that time I never returned home. So then I ended up living in 18 homes in 9 years.
Now, were there any of your aunties, uncles, other family members? Where were they?
So my mother's family is quite racist, and I don't mean that with a small label. I mean, my grandfather was a member of the KKK.
Okay.
They were not going to take in me. Right. And my father's family, again, is non-existent.
Didn't know them. Okay, and so you went into I gotta save myself mode at the age of 8 years old, and successfully put yourself in what you thought was going to be a safer circumstance. Do you remember your first foster home?
Well, so my first foster home, yeah, it was just a short term to find another placement. They were nice. It was just a short term to find another placement. And there were a lot of those mixed into the 18. So before 19, I think it was 96, but I'm not positive. Before 1996, when Washington State sued the foster kids in Washington State sued the state for the treatment of foster kids, because it used to be that they would move you every 6 months, regardless of how you were. It had nothing to do with you. You just got moved.
Yeah.
So that was the situation. And then a few times it was, they're horrible and I want out of here, and I've never had a problem speaking up for myself. So yeah.
Your background was already very tumultuous, and you seem to have experienced racism as early as you could remember. Did that affect the way that you looked at other people as far as race?
So I'm just, that's controversial, especially right now in this moment, but I'm very much more of a person. I have seen kind, wonderful, amazing people of all races. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the ugly of all races. Right. So I don't go down that road. Mm-hmm. My mother, even though she comes from a racist family, like very much so, she only dates Black men. She's actually again, in a relationship with my stepfather, would have been abuser.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're in California, and so it's just that's not really been an issue. I will say that at a certain time in my life, I when I was younger, I did not date African American men because 3 had tried to abuse me. So, and then it came to actually getting to know people, listen to their stories, and realize that people, in my opinion,
Mhm.
people are people. And again, we have evil and we have good, and that's just the way
Sure.
it is. I did not
Sure.
have sexual abuse in foster homes. Most of my foster homes were white. Um, and I think that's a whole issue in itself.
Yeah.
Washington State does not consider race when placing children, and I think that's wrong. Uh,
Wow.
I see a
Okay.
lot of kids who don't. I see a lot of kids who have a problem bonding when they're the only minority in the household.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Washington State, I would assume that it's not very diverse out there.
I don't think it's not compared to where you are. No, I'm
Okay.
like Seattle's pretty diverse. We tried to foster to adopt. So we have one son, and then I have secondary infertility, so we weren't able to have any more children. And so we tried to adopt from the foster system. I had from the age of 8, I had this idea in my head that I would one day adopt a child and give her a better life than I ever had. So I
Right.
wanted to rescue myself, right?
Yep.
And because of where we live, which is, like I said, outside of, we live in the country. Let me just be real. There's cows in my next yard. And the kids that we were always placed with were Caucasian. Now, I did not care at first. At first, I was like, place anybody with me. But the
Right.
first time that I had a little girl who was like, you can't be our mom, you're mocha chocolate, and would pinch her sister and bite her sister and throw massive fits. But then my husband, who is white, would come home and she would be like, Daddy, I realized I could serve a child better that I mirrored. That would be
Yeah.
that would be the right situation. When hateful things happen, it's different to be able to say, instead of saying, oh, I feel bad for you, to be able to say, I get it. I really understand what you're going through. And
Right.
that doesn't mean that I'm anti transracial adoption. I just think they need to consider that fact.
Right. Right. And we'll move on from this, but what you just keyed me into is the fact that race is a really big elephant in the room in the child welfare sector that really needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed confidently. I think that's another really big arena where we need to have conversations and we need to establish best practices, because for somebody like you, it was almost like darn if you do, darn if you don't, and that's just simply not fair. When you just
Well,
want
and
to,
being biracial was actually really hard. I did have one home that was African American, and she was pretty hateful. She really did not like white people, and I'm mixed, and so she would say lots of really horrible things to me. So it went, I mean, it goes both ways. Like I said in the beginning, there are
Mhm.
beautiful people and there are ugly people.
Yeah,
Our skin doesn't determine that.
right. And see, when you're talking about children all across the world, we're here in America. It's about preserving life, taking care of life, understanding the value of life. And I think that we need to start there. I think we need to begin to have conversations about what is life? Who answers that question? Do you know what life is? There's some people who they might hang up the phone with you. They might kick you out of their office before they tell you the answer to that question. But that's a very important question. What is life? So that we can understand why we need to be preserving it and taking care of it, and not judging it by its container, which might be brown, might be ripe, might be yellow.
Right.
You know,
I think that there's ways to discuss race that aren't negative, or I mean, bigger to me than race. Like the reason that I started my whole platform is because I believe in empowerment over entitlement. And
okay.
and that's a huge that's a huge issue right now, because we're very much in the I deserve this because of this, and on all sides, right? On every side of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still address race. You can still say it is important that kids have somebody that mirrors them, who understands. You can't take a kid. Even I've interviewed people who've gone from just, I mean, they've been adopted by the same race, but they've gone to such extremes in wealth, going from extreme poverty to being very, very comfortable, and really struggled with that. But this is one way that's so obvious, and there's, as you pointed out, there's so few minorities that are willing to foster,
Mm-hmm.
that you would think that matching them would be a priority.
Right. I've heard comments like, there's no book on parenting, and there's no book on life. Life doesn't come with a manuscript. And that's one of the reasons why I'm always looking for somebody who's coming up with a manuscript or a book or a philosophy like yours. You said empowerment over entitlement. We have to find more substance around understanding life, because I think that if we can come up with a deeper understanding of life, the purpose of life, then race can become obsolete.
Right. I agree. Like, what I believe the purpose of life, or at least what brings me happy, and that's really what I do on my platform, is I'm trying to take other fosters to a place of happy, or what I call point A to point B, and B is better. Like, how do we get to better? And I think a huge part of that is that we have to contribute.
Right.
Like, when we sit and we're just consumed with ourselves, it makes us miserable. It doesn't make us that point in life. Whereas if we're doing what we can to better the outcomes for other people, for me, that brings me joy. It just makes me.
For me too. Yeah, me too. I think that we all need to get out there and serve in one capacity or another. No matter how big or how small, make sure that you're serving somebody else in some way. I think that's one of the keys to understanding life. It's one of the keys to making you feel good about yourself. And I don't know if you met people like this, but I sure have people who they have it all together financially, but they're unhappy because they're not having enough meaningful interactions in their lives.
Oh yeah, I live in the middle of like the Microsoft Google complex area. Like, everybody, there's tons of wealth out here, and not necessarily tons of happy. There's like, what is it that brings you joy? And some people, I'm at a weird place when it comes to religion right now, but I learned as a kid that joy was Jesus, others, yourself. I definitely take that others, yourself, putting others before yourself, or at least equal to yourself.
Sure. I agree. We have a comment from Carl Arana, and I really appreciate you being here today, Carl. He says, Cedric, race is not the only issue. We also need to look at culture, meaning how can we meet those needs for our youth? Would you like to speak toward that, Carol?
Let me look at it. Okay.
Race is not the only issue.
How can we meet the needs to the culture? Well, that's tricky, and I think that's the part of matching cultures. Like I said, you took somebody from extreme poverty and you moved them over to extreme wealth, and they had a really hard time with that. What if you would have moved somebody to more of that middle class world? What if it wouldn't have been such an extreme situation for them? Because when it comes to culture, it's hard for me to talk about. Like I said, 18 homes, 9 years. Most of my homes were Caucasian, so I do have a certain way about me that if I go into certain areas, they're not very tolerant of who I am, because they think that I'm whitewashed, right? And I'm not whitewashed. Like, I speak up I know what it is to walk this world through as a brown person. I know what it is to walk the world and have people not necessarily trust me or be nicer to me when my hair is a certain way or whatever else. I experience those things, but my culture is very country.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to finish with, your high school journey. and then so we can hurry up and get to your work so we can talk about some solutions.
Sure. Okay.
You seem to be the type of person who's ready and willing to have a conversation about what's next.
Right.
Yeah, and Carl brought up a really good point when he says that we need to talk about culture in child welfare. Ani King Riley says that was a great point. And so when you guys drop comments in the comment section, we're going to get to those. Believe me. But for right now, Carib, I want you to tell me about what were your successes in high school?
Can I rewind to 6th grade? Because that's where life changed.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right. So in 5th grade, a girl decided to holler across the playground that I'm the daughter of a drug dealer and call me the N-word. Okay. I was relatively shy, but I jumped over 2 desks and I proceeded to pull her hair, just like 2 giant gobs of pulling her hair. All right. It took 2 teachers to pull me off of her. I got a reputation, of being scary, psychotic, and whatever else. So go into 6th grade. The teachers draw lots to see who's going to get me in their classroom. I end up with Mr. Garza, probably a male because he could be authoritarian, or whatever. But within the first week, he pulled me out of class and he said to me, I understand that you don't have a lot of choices in your life. Like it wasn't a secret that I was a foster kid. I had a horrible, horrible situation in that home. And he's like, I understand that you don't have a lot of choices in your life. And those choices go down to like where you sleep at night and, what words are coming in your head. The people in that home were saying things to themselves about me that, by the time I'm 13, I'm going to have 2 children and be on welfare for the rest of my life. I was not a promiscuous child. There was no reason to say anything like that. I literally could not open my mouth and talk to the opposite sex. I was scared to death of them. So for them to say that, honestly, I thought to them, F you, I will show you. But I had no idea how. And then I had Mr. Garza come to me and say, you don't have all these choices, but the one choice you have in life is who you want to be. And that was like mind blowing for me. Like as a 6th grader, I was like, I have control of this? Mm-hmm. And that automatically, literally, I walked back into that classroom like a new person. And I just thought, I have control of this. And I started looking at people going, who's hurting and how can I help them? And right. Even though I was in extremely horrible, horrible situations in the foster homes that I was in, I was still just like, how can I help people? And that stuck with me. And that has always stuck with me all the way through. I was lucky in that when I was 17, my junior year of high school, I made it into a performing arts college. And so I moved over from Eastern Washington to Western Washington to be an actress. That had been my goal. And it was a huge deal. Cover of the newspaper, all of these things. Everybody wished for the best for me, right? But I still aged out. And it was still a matter of, here's your bag. We wish you well. Good luck. And there was nothing else. There was no other support. So I go to school being little Miss Dorothy from the country, from Wizard of Oz. And I'm like, this is not Kansas. This is Capitol Hill. It's a totally different world than anything I'm used to.
Right.
And I did not fit in. And I thought these were going to be my people. I thought it was going to be like the old show Fame, where we were running down the streets singing and dancing and jumping on cars. And it was not that. It was a bunch of very, very wealthy people and me. And my teachers liked me, which did not go well with the kids. And I ended up that final year trying to mop the floor, which means I overdosed on sleeping tablets. And that's how college ended for me. I did end up going onto a conservatory program, but that's how my big dream and my big stardom ended for me, is just not having, I didn't have the supports I needed, but I still believe in taking the personal responsibility. So had I had a therapist, I think I probably would have made it through, but that's okay.
Were you, did you ever get referred to a therapist at some point?
When I had a job and I could afford to see a therapist, like on a
Mhm.
sliding scale, and then I also had a therapist all the way through growing up, from
Okay.
from that teacher all the way through my years in foster care, and that's part of why people believed that I was going to make it, that I was going to succeed.
Now, can you talk about the value of therapy and how it helped you over the course of your journey?
Oh my gosh, I mean, it gave me the proper mindset, to go in and be able to talk about the things and to be I felt supported when I was in that room. My therapist's name was Paul Martin, and I don't mind saying his last name. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he was so amazing. Every single home I went to, he was still my therapist. It never changed.
Okay.
He was my advocate. He started showing me, I'm gonna out my age here, but he showed me a picture of Whitney Houston once and said, "Here's a role model." Now, of course, we know,
All right.
but at that time, it was like, oh my gosh, here's somebody who's achieving something who looks somewhat like me, and um, just having that one person. I think it's Josh Shipp. He's a motivational speaker, and he talks about having the one person. And I
Mhm.
always ask people that when I'm interviewing them, who was your one person? I would say that I had Paul Martin and I had Mr. Garza, and I just had these people who were there in my corner,
Mhm.
and they saw the big picture. Like, I remember once my foster mom, she called me the N-word, and she did a bunch of other, just some stupid, horrible things. And everybody knew that if I went to a group home, or at least I was taught that if I went to a group home, I'd get eaten alive because I'm a tender-hearted person. I don't really have a tough shell. And so Paul Martin was just like, I know it's horrible. I know that all you have here is the roof over your head. But if you can just get through the next 2 years of having this roof over your head, you can make it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Kara Mars right now. And what she is inspiring me to understand is that when you look at a young child, you don't know what they're going through at home. You don't know the way that their parents are treating them. You don't know the way that, the little girls or little boys at the playground is treating them. So I want you to take a chance, come up with something phenomenal, great, and nice to say to a young person the next time you get a chance, because you never know what impact your comment could have on the trajectory of a young person in care. We'll be right back after this brief message with Kara Mars. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. And we're back. Kara, how you feeling out there?
I'm great, thanks.
All righty. Before we went to break, we have a couple comments we're gonna talk about right now. Carl is really being active, and I deeply appreciate it. He says therapy is tough. What helped you build rapport with the clinician? Does therapy work, or do we need to find contemporary ways to connect?
I really appreciated having somebody who was extremely honest with me. I've, in my adult life, been a foster parent, and sometimes, yeah, working around it, just playing games or whatever. I think I've sat in the room and I've thought, why aren't you just honest? You know, we've been through so much that being honest is not going to shatter our walls. Like,
Right.
that's going to make, to me, that's going to make, it brings the trust further much faster than if you say, hey, can we play a game? You know, but then
Right.
there are kids who playing that game makes them feel safe. You know, it makes them feel like they don't need to talk about things.
Mhm.
But for me personally, Paul Martin coming in and saying, how was this? How do you feel about this? Is there anything you could have done differently? You know, I agree. You couldn't have done anything differently. The situation just sucks. You know, was a useful, it was just very useful, like I said, to have somebody that I knew was on my side.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'll just put this here. I spent years of my life in foster care as well. I went through 5 different foster homes before I was adopted at the age of 15 and a half. And for me, therapy was something that I really did not like. Not because the therapist or the counselor wasn't good, but because I saw them as, another stranger thinking that they know me, or another stranger who's diagnosing me, and it not being accurate, but it's going to affect the way that, my social worker treats me or my foster parent treats me or the way that people talk about me. And so I didn't like it. But, all of this kind of segues us into our next segment, which is our need to be honest in child welfare. And like Carl said a few minutes ago, and like you just said, number one, you're saying we need to be honest. I totally agree with that. I think that's huge because for kids in care, we don't like the facade of you acting like you got everything under control and you know what's going on in my life and you know what needs to happen next in my life and you know me, because guess what? You don't, and I think a lot of kids can sense that, and that builds a disconnect between the child and whatever person is trying to provide services because you're not being real. You're not saying, hey, guess what? I don't know you.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people are afraid to trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're afraid to trigger, when you act like we're these fragile things in these boxes, I think that the biggest thing that frustrates me is that people have low expectations for foster kids. They set these labels on us. And I think that that's when I do interviews with people, what I find a lot of times why they don't like therapy is that they walked into a therapist's office and walked out with a diagnosis. That was not my experience in therapy. My experience in therapy was, here's finally a person who's going to listen to me. He took the time afterwards to write because I don't even remember him writing when I was in there. I just remember somebody being on my side and in my corner. And honestly, I remember wishing that he would adopt me. Like, that's what I remembered the whole time, because it was just so, oh my gosh, somebody's listening to me and I feel safe here.
Right.
So
what you ultimately did was you created a system where you interview people today?
So I'm doing 2 things. One thing is yes, I interview former fosters. I call us the invisible people. I think that for so many of us, especially young men, not seen. People have expected the worst of you, and then when you deliver the worst, there's no surprise, and it's only those of us who get out and stop the cycle that are the surprise. And so my goal, well, let me put it, so I started off with fostering because I wanted to change the lives of kids. But I did have that wrong perspective. A lot of times people think when they go into fostering as a former foster that they're going to be the world's best. I thought I was going to be Mary Poppins. I totally expected to be amazing and know everything. And what I found with my kids is they wanted to go home. It didn't matter that we had a nicer home. They had cleaner stuff. They had all of these things. They wanted to go home. That was really hard for me to get into my head because I never, ever wanted to go home. Mm-hmm. So the last child that we had was extremely, extremely difficult. We were with a private agency. You cannot even remove the child to a safe place. We had no no recourse. And she came after my son with a butcher knife. Okay.
Oh,
And when I called the agency and said, this is happening, they said, I know it's really hard, but you just need to let her work through these things. And then afterwards, their solution was horseback riding lessons. And I just thought, you know what? I understand equine therapy. Don't get me wrong. It can be great. But if you're not safe around humans, maybe putting you around an animal is not the greatest thing.
mm-hmm.
But my thing here was, I can't fix this system. I honestly cannot fix the foster system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't know how it works in different states except for the interviews that I do. What I can do is help the people who've aged out, help the people who've already been through it, who already believe the absolute worst things about themselves. And I can give them a moment to share their stories.
Right.
You know, and in that moment of listening to them, I can ask them important questions like, where was the moment where you first found your self-worth? You know, where was the moment when you were felt strong enough to get away from a situation? You know, all of these things. And sometimes these are people who've got college degrees and they, on the outside, they look like they figured it all out. And they're like, they just come down to that tiny little kid, right? And they're just like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they still don't know. And so my goal now is to, I do a YouTube channel and I've just started it, and I'm trying to share like life skills and the things that I've learned. I just didn't have a conversation with my camera and just say, you know, this is the way it is. And I'm just extremely honest, not extremely entertaining, because I know what it is to be an actress. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell people the things that nobody else had the guts to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we know, you know, I think it's Michelle Obama, but you know, when we know better, we do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that we are limitless. Like every person is limitless, but then you take foster people who have been through hell, and then you give them a chance to aspire to greatness, and you stand behind them and you say, I know you can do it. And that's something that a lot of them have never heard.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's what we do.
I think that's great. Did you also start a nonprofit or a foundation of sorts?
So what I plan on doing, I have not started this yet. What I plan on doing, and mind you, I'm just like, you had yesterday this amazingly successful person on, and I loved everything about her show. And I'm sitting here going, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm just a mom. That's what I do. Now, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a mom because I've broken the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But what my goal is to do is to start kind of an AA type situation, okay, where you can go in and you can talk about being a former foster, and you can, share your story and have that space held for you. But then the second part of every single meeting is to share a life skill, is to talk about, this is how we fill out a resume. This is how we fill out a resume if we've never been, if we have no college behind us.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we move forward. Because I think a lot of times, a lot of groups are all about, let's kind of wallow, let's trauma bond, let's tell our stuff and feel good feeling bad. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be about that. Like, I think, yes, these things have happened. How have they made us stronger, and how do we move up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes to the way that I'm looking at you today as a very strong person. I see huge strength in you, and I see huge potential in you, potential that you've been expressing from the time that you put yourself in foster care. That took tremendous courage. And so today, for you to be an effective mom, it's an inspiration, and it's a very, very, very important story. So I'm not going to be doing any minimizing that here today at all. I recently saw you advocating for youth in care on Facebook and in other areas of social media. And I said, wow, this woman is always fighting for the cause. And to Carl's comment earlier, I think that youth in care are in this big matrix, right? They're in this big matrix of culture, identity, the prospects of the future, and then all these people all in between. And I think it's people like you who come up with little pockets of help that really end up making a difference along the way. If we could, go ahead.
No, I said I hope so. I think that it's a huge uphill battle because we are they are put in boxes. They walk into a place and they're immediately, you have ADHD. Well, guess what? A lot of these people don't have ADHD. They have, I need to survive. So learning my alphabet is not as important as figuring out where I'm going to get my next meal. So my mind is going all over the place, and that's called executive functioning issues. It's different than ADHD, but they're immediately labeled and then they're immediately drugged, right?
Yep.
And so those kind of things, it is a huge uphill battle. And that's why I said, I can't really help the system. I can't go against it, especially when people think what they're doing is right. But I'm watching the people on the outside. I'm sorry, just a second. I'm watching the people on the outside, on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Say, I didn't do anything wrong. I was sexually abused by my father for 4 years and then put into a group home, and they gave me drugs forever. And then I became a drug addict when I got out. And it's like, but I can't fight it. So back to his question of how do we change the system? I have no idea how to fix that. I only know that to be there for the people when they get out is what we can do. I only know that if I can mentor, if I can teach a 4-H program that happens to tell a kid that you are fine just the way that you are, like Mr. Rogers, then I'm going to do that every single chance that I get, but I'm not going to stand out there and protest, because for me, that's not going to change these outs.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that this is not about being an entertainer for you. And
Right.
this is not about, putting on a show for you. Realistically speaking, this is about raising awareness for, the way that young people's lives are being impacted.
Can I stop you for a second? It's more than that, because that's another thing is that a lot of people think that when you're talking about age out, you're only talking about the youth.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about people that are 57 years old writing on pages, how do I learn to love myself when no one has ever loved me?
Yep.
It's a huge gamut. It is our homeless people. It's our incarcerated people. It's all of these people for decades.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's why I agree with you 100%. One thing that I really don't appreciate is when I'm doing my work and somebody says, "Oh, you're doing such great work for the kids." Guess what? Just like you said, this is not just for the kids. First of all, it's for me. I'm in my 30s. I'm about to be 32 years old. This is for me. Every single time I have a conversation here, it's inspiring me, right? I'm not a 5-year-old anymore. And so it's not just about the young people, like you said, the youngest of us. It's about the adults. It's about the people who are in jail. It's about the 47% of people who are homeless, who are in foster care. It's about the world. I believe that foster care is like the microcosm of the whole rest of the world. And so we are addressing world issues when we look at what's happening in foster care. I'm sure you agree with that.
Oh yeah, I had one woman who told me that, people tend to think that foster kids are going to be the next prisoners, the next prostitutes, the next whatever. But why? Why can't they be the next presidents? Why can't they? They've shown their strength. They've proved their mettle. So why can't they be? And I really think that it comes down to change your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Change your expectations of foster kids. And that is something that I felt like when kids came to my home, like even, you get a 5-year-old into your home and people are inclined to go, how can I save this child? How can I make everything better? And I'm like, okay, well, today we're going to learn how to put our shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're going to, and they're like, well, why would you have him do that? And I'm like, because when he goes home, if he doesn't know how to put his shoes on and put his coat on and grab his bag and get on the bus, he's not going to eat.
Right.
So there's a point where we really need to address empowering versus how can we save you? How can we give you everything and make it easy for you?
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? When they turn 18, it's not easy. Or when they turn 21, depending on their state. But at that age, it's not easy. And if they don't have the tools that they need, that's where I think that the change has to come from.
Sure. I agree with you 100%. I think that when you take a young person from their home or you welcome a young person into the child welfare system, what, to me, in my different type of world, what you're implying is that you're going to do better than my parents were doing and what my family was doing. And so it becomes about being able to guarantee that because you're in foster care, you're going to have secured housing well until you're ready to get your own home. Because you're in foster care, you're going to have an excellent dietary plan for the duration of your life here in child welfare until you're ready and able to go to Whole Foods and eat properly. Because you're in foster care, you're going to have protection. You're going to literally have people protecting you like you've never been protected before. Because you're in foster care, your life is going to be planned out to a T in a way that you couldn't have ever imagined. And I think that that's sort of the mind frame that we need to get into. Not you're in foster care, so let me get several philosophical bandages for you and let me see if we can get some temporary government funding for you. But because you're in foster care, your life is getting ready to be made so great that it's worth you being separated from your biological family. Because
people do not do that, right? Like in their heads and in their hearts, nothing can trump for many of these kids. Nothing can trump being with their biological family. They don't think of the abuse as being abuse. That's the thing that was so hard for me to wrap my head around, because at 8, I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
For these kids, they're like, I want to go home. And I'm sitting there going, I picked you up at the hospital with bruises. You want to go home, So that's I don't think that so great is quite the way, but so safe is. They need to be safe and they need to be prepared. And that's the thing that's not being done. They are not being prepared for life outside. They are being, instead, I'm seeing posts that say things like, I was in foster care, now I want rent for free for the rest of my life. Not the real world for any of us. It's just not, and so it's like, what's real world? If you beat somebody up, you don't get horseback riding lessons.
Right.
There's a consequence because life has consequences, good and bad.
Do you have a top 3 things that you would like to see happen in child welfare?
Oh, geez. Okay, so I think that the first thing that I would like to see is definitely a switch from empowerment to entitlement. And what happened is that the gamut went from...
You mean entitlement to empowerment?
Yes, did I say the opposite?
Yeah. I got you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think that people should be trained. Okay, in my perfect world, and this is super controversial and probably a little bit like fairy tale like, but in a perfect world, I think that if kids went into a place that was like Hogwarts, like they have 18 months generally before termination of parental rights. All right. So if they could go into a situation where they went to a school where they weren't falling between the cracks, where they're all equal, where the caregivers are not completely strained, because this is real. It's not billboards. This is the truth, right? So instead, they have people that are like camp counselors that are teaching them, educating them, and empowering them for 18 months. And I think that would be a much better situation than splitting up kids and having some go to great, happy Disneyland foster home and some people becoming the slaves for their foster parents. So I think that that's one thing that could change. And I think that there should be kind of the drug issue has to be addressed.
Now, what do you mean by that?
I mean, drugging our kids because it's easy. It shouldn't be, and that's what I feel like. I feel like a lot of people, foster parents don't really have the say. The state has the say, and biological parents have the say until they're adopted. So, but if somebody thinks that their kid should, be on drugs because it's easy, I have had kids who've come in, who've walked in the door, and within 10 minutes, somebody has written me a prescription for them. And I'm just like, can we try something else first?
Right.
And then I've had one family where the child's parents look at me and say, we trust you. You're doing a good job. You do what you're doing, which is teaching them executive functioning skills. While another child, same age, is on the drugs. And I'm watching what's happening here. And I'm not saying that drugs are bad for every single situation. Medication it serves its purpose. But I do think that kids are drugged too quickly.
Right. One thing that I want to add to what you're saying, because again, I agree with you completely, is that the chemical release that you got when that professional told you that you choose who you want to be, right? That caused a chemical release for you, and it totally changed your mentality. I think that the same way that we look at drugs as an option to affect different behaviors, I think that in addition to that, we need to look at different experiences as a way to stimulate different chemical realities in young people, because thoughts are chemicals. And so if your thoughts aren't good, that could by proxy mean that your experiences aren't good. But what if we gave you an experience that would change the way that you see life and change the way that you see the future of your life? Are we doing enough to create a fantastic experience for youth and care? And I think that that's a great capstone for this conversation. What are we doing to create phenomenal experiences for young people in care, and for adults too? The grown-ups are invited too. The 50-year-olds who are never healed are invited as well. What are we doing to create a phenomenal experience for them? Because what they've experienced in the past has been traumatic. It's been terrible. It's been unthinkable. So the response to that, it must be absolutely phenomenal. It's going to have to be some of the greatest experiences that we've ever seen. What are we doing to create a phenomenal experience for people who are impacted by the child welfare trajectory? I think that that's what Kara Myers is saying when she says empower them instead of having conversations about entitlement, because conversations about entitlement, they never end. And they go all different types of ways, and they go all different types of levels of understanding. But what are we doing to create an experience that empowers them so much that when they leave, they're a different person? That's what we have to get to. That's what the takeaway is from this conversation. And that's what we need to seek for our future. For our future, I want to experience it. Kara wants to experience it. Something so phenomenal that's not over in 20 minutes. No, it's not a 30-minute presentation. No, it's not a 1-hour speech from a motivational speaker who's going to come and go. It's a lifestyle. What are we doing to provide a phenomenal lifestyle for youth and families in the greater community and care, which would also impact the world? Kara, I have 3 questions for you, and I need you to answer them in about a minute and a half. You've been great today. The first is, what is survival to you?
Safety.
What is success to you?
Stopping the cycle and contributing.
When you say contributing, what are we contributing? What do you mean?
I mean, contributing in a positive way. Whatever you have, I believe that we're given gifts. So using those gifts in a way that can uplift, can transform other people. That's what I mean. Right.
And so you're encouraging young people and adults to stop the cycle of whatever they've been through. Stop that cycle. Don't do it again. Stop that cycle, and then find a way to give back. What is greatness to you?
Probably contentment. Like truly being content, being at that place where you're truly happy because you've reached that level of success where you contribute and where you feel like you've left your mark. I think we've created your legacy.
Carib, I want to let you know that I appreciate you coming here and sharing your story today. You've come a long way, a really, really long way. And your courage has saved your life, and it could potentially, if it hasn't already, saved the lives of others by the things that you say, the advocacy that you do, and the work that you commit yourself to. So I want to let you know that I respect you, and I'm giving you your crown today while you're still living. And I'm letting you know, and I'm letting the world know that Carib Mars, you are America's next motivator.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. Thanks for stopping by, all right? I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Carib Mars, another one of America's Next Motivator. Youth and families who are affected by child welfare, they have a mentality that could change the world. Hey, each and every episode of America's Next Motivator has something here for you. You just need to stop by and pick it up.